Thank you all for joining the Glendale Stormwater Master Plan. We're going to go ahead and give it a few more minutes to see if anyone is having trouble logging in. So we'll get officially started at about 6:02. Thank you. It is 6:02, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, all. Thank you very much for joining this virtual public meeting to learn and provide feedback on the ongoing Stormwater Master Plan for the City of Glendale. This is the first of two virtual public meetings. The second meeting will be held next week on Wednesday, June 1st, 2022. At the same time, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. The information to be presented will be the same at both meetings to provide residents an additional option for attendance. Therefore, if you have neighbors that are not here today, please feel free to alert them of the event next week. The meetings will be recorded. A recording of the virtual meeting will be made available after the second presentation on June 1st, 2022. So as we move on to the next slide, I would like to acknowledge representatives from the City of Glendale who are part of our team and have worked with us in developing the Stormwater Master Plan. These include the Mayor, Mr. Mike Wilcox, the City Administrator, Mr. Benjamin DeClue, the City Superintendent, Mr. Terry Jones, and Paul Rutger, Lisa Cushing, Aaron Newman, Sarah Vitale, Rich Fanning, Barry Lane, who are the aldermen and alderwomen of the City of Glendale, as well as the residents who have participated with us as we have collected data the last few months. With Lockmiller Group, the city engineer, I would like to introduce Mr. Scott J. Smith, who actively participates in the Board of Aldermen and Alderwomen meetings and provides updates for all of the civil engineering projects that Lockmiller is assisting the city with, including this Stormwater Master Plan. My name is Laura Mwirigi Reitler, and I serve as a project manager. Ms. Alison Manion, the project engineer, whom you have likely talked to in person over the phone or email over the course of the project, is also with us today and will also be presenting on specifics of the plan. We'll move to the presentation overview. This presentation will be completed in 3 sections. These include 1, defining the Stormwater Master Plan. What is it? What it is not, and what it is needed for. What's its purpose? I will lead the first section of the presentation, and Alison will lead the second and third part of the presentation. There will be a live question and answer session. This will be held after each section that has been outlined above. Since this meeting is being held over Zoom, we will review a few instructions to help residents interact with the engineer and the city as it relates to the platform and the Stormwater Master Plan. We will also set some ground rules. These are mainly to assist us in making sure that we cover the presentation material, and most of all, that we are respectful of everybody's time this evening. So I will go through the Zoom resident user interface. You may have noticed that you are in a listen and view mode. This means that while you can hear us and see us, that's the presenter and the panelists, we cannot hear or see you. We do want to hear from you. Residents will be able to type in their questions at any time during the presentation. To do this, you may submit your questions using the Q&A button or tab. To get to this, wiggle your mouse or tap on your screen. A menu bar will appear at the bottom of the screen, that you can see on the slide. And by selecting the Q&A button, you can type in your question or comment. Please only use the Q&A feature specifically to type the questions. The chat box will not be monitored during the presentation, and therefore questions asked may not be answered if they are put in through the chat box. Please note also that information put on the chat box is visible to everybody unless you specifically select that it only be visible to the host and panelists. Questions will be answered by the presenter or appropriate field deferred to the panelists during the Q&A session only. To be respectful of everyone's time, we please ask that questions be directly related to the Stormwater Master Plan and the part of the presentation in session. Questions related to specific properties may not be answered at the live Q&A and will be followed up on and directed to the appropriate panelists. Preference will be given to questions that apply to multiple residents. Individual property questions may also be answered after the meeting by directly contacting the city engineer, Lockmiller Group. Contact information for Lockmiller Group, the city engineer, as well as for the city will be provided at the end of the presentation. If you have specific questions you'd like to direct to any member of the panel, please go ahead and submit them, and we will make sure that they get the question. Thank you. We will now get started with the Stormwater Master Plan. So what is a Stormwater Master Plan? Really, it's a document that details procedures that we use to evaluate the drainage infrastructure and natural conveyance systems of the city, and then outline systematically how to approach addressing these deficiencies. Drainage infrastructure refers to pipe sewer networks. That's underground piping and inlets that are installed to intercept flow. They also include improved channels as well as regional storage basins. Drainage infrastructure in the city of Glendale is owned and managed by the Metropolitan Sewer District. Natural conveyance systems include drainage ditches, creeks, and low-impact development best management practices. This may include private rain gardens, for example. The master plan is aimed at identifying, prioritizing, and guiding project implementation strategies for stormwater-related capital improvement projects, which will be referred to as CIPs through this presentation. You will know that we have those pictures that we have taken were actually taken and submitted by the residents of Glendale. So these are events that happened within the city and impacted day-to-day activities of the community. Next slide. So what does a stormwater master plan do? What really does it do? I mean, why do we need it? So one, it identifies the needs required to manage surface runoff when it rains, conveyed through natural and built infrastructure, and then discharge it safely back to the rivers and creeks. That's really what a stormwater master plan and a stormwater infrastructure system is supposed to do, if it is working correctly. The plan also appraises the severity of impact to life, property, and daily activities of a community in the event of a storm event, which can usually not be managed with the existing storm sewer system. Then it presents mitigation measures that are feasible and applicable to addressing water quality, volume control, and reducing the impact of surface runoff. After this, it prioritizes the recommendations or projects in the capital improvement plan through a benefit cost analysis. It provides a pragmatic approach to addressing aging infrastructure, replacing infrastructure that is beyond its useful life. It addresses the physical condition, for example, if there are broken pipes or outfalls that are not working correctly. And then it also addresses capacity. Does the pipe system or conveyance system have sufficient capacity to convey the flow that is getting to that point? And then it might recommend, for example, upsizing pipes. Then it also addresses community growth. And while the city of Glendale is considered a fully developed residential growth, there's still development with the city that may impact surface runoff, for example, infill development projects. Then the other thing it does is that it does identify funding options that make it possible to implement the projects. We'll go to the next slide. So what makes a project feasible for it to be included in a stormwater master plan? Well, there are a few characteristics. For one, and this usually will address safety, accessibility, and are usually concerned with public projects. So one, if stormwater or flooding has an adverse impact to public safety, then resolving the issue is considered in a stormwater master plan. If it results in impeding access to community amenities, emergency routes, hospitals, school bus routes, then it also, that's a characteristics of why a project that would remedy this would be included in the stormwater master plan. If the adverse impact from stormwater runoff resulted from construction of a public project, that is, for example, upstream, and has negative impacts downstream, then that would also be considered in the stormwater master plan. Then most projects that are considered impact more than one property, which make it impossible for one property owner, for example, to fix or address the issue. So if it's impacting multiple property owners, then it would make it into a stormwater master plan. We'll go to the next slide. So now that we know at least what a stormwater master plan is, it is important to discuss what it is not. So though some of the following may be made worse during wet weather conditions, the stormwater master plan does not specifically target these issues. This include, for example, if you have a yard ponding on a specific project and it's contained within a single property, then that would be something that would be considered not in the stormwater master plan because it could be addressed by that property owner. Basement foundation cracks. Well, you might see more water in your basement during wet weather. Actually repairing or coming out with a solution to fix the foundation would not be a project that would be included in a stormwater master plan. Sanitary sewer overflows. Well, the good thing is that the sanitary sewer system is also owned by the Metropolitan Sewer District. However, solving issues that are directly related to the sanitary sewer overflows are not considered as part of the stormwater master plan. Then driveway, street, and sidewalk improvement projects are usually also not considered within the stormwater master plan as capital improvement projects. Now, while I say this about sanitary sewer overflows or driveways or sidewalk improvements, that does not mean that the work cannot be coordinated with projects identified in a capital improvement plan that's included in a stormwater master plan. And as Alison goes through the projects that we have recommended, you will see how holistically some of these projects can be put together. Then the other thing that a stormwater master plan do is that it does not guarantee that flooding will not occur. Because that is because design is pragmatic and we design for a specific storm. And while we know, for example, a 500-year flood may happen tomorrow, we can't base all our design on a 500-year storm or guarantee that that kind of storm will not happen. It is, however, important to know that we do consider projects that are not CIP, that means they're not construction projects, but there might be recommendations put forward in the Stormwater Master Plan that give guidance on how to address some of these issues. And some of these might include ordinances, for example, or doing risk management. Next slide. Now we'll review why a Stormwater Master Plan is needed. One is risk management. Stormwater runoff may present risk to property and life, and a risk Stormwater Master Plan through the process of watershed analysis helps evaluate the relative risk from flooding the community may face. Then one very important thing is that it moves us past recording and identifying issues, or when we call it complaining, to actually being prepared, makes sure that we are prepared to address the issues. This is especially so when the opportunity for funding occurs. So specifically, for example, this Stormwater Master Plan is funded through the OMCI program. The OMCI stands for Operation, Maintenance, Construction, and Improvement. It is a program that MSD runs. How does the program work? MSD has set up a taxing districts within service areas and levies a tax per property value assessed. This information is available online, and you can actually look how much is assessed, for example, for residential properties, which is at 0.06 for every dollar for residential properties. When this money is collected by MSD, MSD uses these funds to address usually flooding and erosion issues. What is important to note is that it's a cost share program, and the city, being within the district, is able to apply for funding to be able to direct some of this money to stormwater issues that they face. The other source of funding that actually became available within the last 2 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and came into effect and can be applied from last week, is our American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funding. So ARPA funding actually does have specific funding that it has directed to water, wastewater, and stormwater projects. Specifically for urban stormwater funding, this money can be used for measures to manage, reduce, treat, reuse, or recapture stormwater or subsurface drainage water. It can also be used for green infrastructure, such as green streets. So having a plan like this available makes it possible for the city to be able to have already identified and have a plan that can be submitted in order to be able to get funding from these sources, the OMCI from MSD or ARPA, which is for this specific program, is being administered by the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. So that is the initial presentation that I had for defining what a Stormwater Master Plan is. And Alison, you can let me know if there are any questions that have come up.
Okay, yes, I do not see any questions that people have typed in the Q&A box. Just a reminder to everyone that any questions you have, that it's a box with some speech bubbles, and below it says Q&A. Any questions you have, type in there, and we have a few different question slides throughout the presentation to take some breaks for questions. At this time, it does not look like there are any questions, Laura, so I think we can move. And I have one question, but I think you're somebody asked if those areas, Moreland, Willow Oak, and 3rd Street, the only areas being helped by the master plan. No, those were just example photos she had up, and we have several example photos throughout the entire presentation.
Yes, and yes, as we go on, you will see all the recommended projects throughout the city. And yes, those are just some example of some of the of the very many pictures and videos that we received from the residents. And it is important to note as we go through the project how this actually relates with real events. So it's good to know that.
Okay. And then we have a question, is there a map available to show where the projects are? Yes, again, that'll be a little bit further on into the presentation.
Correct.
Okay, and I think the rest of the questions at this point are shortly going to be addressed. So I think we can move on to the next section of the presentation.
Okay, so in this session, this is really an introduction for the second and third sections, and it reviews the Stormwater Master Plan process. So how did this come to be? So as the city engineer, Lockmiller and the city met to review stormwater issues and first determine whether a Stormwater Master Plan could be developed for the city and whether it could qualify as an OMCI project. So after meeting with the city, Lockmiller went back and developed the scope of work and fee proposal to present to the city, as well as to MSD and to the Deer Creek Watershed Committee for review. So everything that is submitted for the Deer Creek OMCI program is first reviewed by the Deer Creek Watershed Committee at MSD. Once that is approved, then it is presented to the board, the MSD board, for review and approval. The first process is called an introduction, and this was in June of 2021, where the proposal for doing the Stormwater Master Plan for under OMCF funding was proposed. And then the second step is when it actually goes approved and goes into ordinance. What this means is that it gives the city approval to go ahead and get into contract with MSD so that they can apply for funding on an annual basis to get reimbursement for money that has been spent for approved stormwater projects, including the Stormwater Master Plan. So that was approved by MSD and written into ordinance in July 8th of 2021. And following that, the city of Glendale approved and provided notice to proceed to Lockmiller Group to move forward with the Stormwater Master Plan. The areas, the tabs shown in blue represent the actual tasks that are being completed to complete the Stormwater Master Plan. These include data collection and mapping and public outreach, problem identification, which include a lot of field survey, and then stormwater needs assessment analysis. And currently, the draft recommendation phase. This is the part of the process we are in at now. And this includes a public meeting in order to present some of the recommendations that we have made to address stormwater issues, and then get feedback from the community before we can develop a final report. Once a final report is ready, then funding and implementation takes place. So with that, I will give Alison the opportunity to go ahead and present on section 2 and 3.
Thank you, Laura. And if anyone's wondering about a specific area or any specific projects, those will be addressed a little bit later in the presentation, just for anyone who was wondering. So as Laura was saying, the first step once we started the master plan was the data collection and mapping phase. And as you can see there's an exhibit on your screen right now, just to let you know a little bit of what's going on. The purple outline is the border of Glendale, and you will see that reoccurring on several exhibits throughout this presentation. And you can see the neighboring cities labeled as well. To start off, we there's three main creeks that run through the city of Glendale: Shady Grove Creek, a feeder creek for Worson Woods Creek, and Rock Hill Creek. And so we divided the city up into three watersheds. The yellow area, all of the stormwater in this area drains eventually to Shady Grove Creek through the network of storm sewers. All the area in this, all the stormwater in the pink area drains to Rock Hill Creek, and the area in this blue outline drains to the feeder creek for Worson Woods Creek. One thing to note here is these go in and out of the borders of Glendale. Stormwater does not adhere to the political boundaries. And that's an advantage of MSD owning all of the infrastructure, all of the storm sewers, and everything throughout this area between Glendale and the neighboring cities. So if there is a project that would cross boundaries, that would be an MSD project because they have the jurisdiction to do so. And there are areas of Glendale that, for example, the southern end of Glendale drains actually to Gravois Creek, and so it drains out of the city of Glendale. So to start off the field work, the data collection phase, we came up with some target properties. And how we did that was one of two ways. The first way was MSD complaint data. So properties that had a recorded history at MSD of having stormwater related problems. And the other way we targeted properties was the city of Glendale officials having knowledge of specific areas having stormwater problems. And so on this exhibit on the right, you can see the properties that we visited throughout our field work in the city. And we were collecting data in our online map, which I've now exited the PowerPoint and am sharing our online data collection map. So we were out there, you might have seen us with iPads. And so this is the map we had. The red lines and dots are the the sanitary sewer. The blue are the storm sewer, and the green are the parcels that we visited throughout the project. And the area that we started our fieldwork in was the lower Algonquin area. And this was an area that was an area of known stormwater issues to the city of Glendale. And we started our fieldwork here, and I'm going to share a few videos that were submitted just to show you guys a few examples of what some property owners sent in. So this is an example, and I'm going to go over later kind of a little more in depth of what we're seeing here, but you can see the roadway is completely flooded, and this is a driveway. This is along Algonquin, and the driveway is completely covered in water. There's a vehicle parked in the driveway. As the video continues, the garage is flooded as well. And so that is the area that we started in. And here's another video submitted by a property owner along Edwin Avenue. This is through the backyards along Edwin Avenue. Normally it's a very small channel running back there, but this is obviously completely overtopped the banks of the channel and is running across multiple backyards through Glendale. So those were just a few examples of some of the pieces of media, the videos submitted by property owners. All of these are included, they are all uploaded into our mapping system. So every video and photo that you sent in is uploaded and included with your parcel. And you are still able to submit those. Our contact information is going to be at the end of this presentation. It was also in the letter that was sent out. And please continue to send in any videos or photos, and we can upload those to this map. Now we can get back to the presentation. And So when we were out in the field, some of the things we were looking for. So the next phase of the project is problem identification. That flow chart that Laura showed earlier, the next phase was problem identification. So while we were out there, we were talking to you guys, we were making some field observations, we were taking your phone calls and emails, and through all of that, we came up with this this map on the right-hand side. The color of the points correspond to these problems that we identified, and the problems we were looking for and that we identified in the city of Glendale were roadway flooding, main structure building flooding, backyard flooding, basement backups, driveway flooding, sinkholes, storm system deterioration, channel ditch erosion, and any other property damage that was being caused by stormwater. So to go a little bit into depth on a few of the problems that we saw most frequently in the city, we'll start with roadway flooding. So these are two photos again submitted by you guys, by property owners. The left-hand side is along Frederick. There is a creek running through the front yards and a bridge across the road here and a culvert under the bridge to convey the stormwater. And this is an event that happens a few times a year where the creek overflows and floods into the street, making the street impassable. And similarly, along Algonquin here, the culvert and creek conveying the water under the street overflows. And so the water then goes into the road and floods the roadway. And that's an issue because we need the roadways to be accessible throughout Glendale. The next issue that we saw a little bit of throughout the city was main structure building flooding. And this is your house and garage structures being flooded. This photo on the left is along Parkland, and this shows a flooding event currently happening. And the photo on the right shows some of the aftermath of a main structure building flooding and some of the damage that it can cause. And this is a safety issue as far as the master plan is concerned. Another thing we saw quite a bit of was backyard flooding. So here are two examples. This along Edwin here, this was the second, this is a photo of what was happening in that second video that I showed earlier. And this is obviously a safety issue because that water was flowing pretty fast through the backyards, but it's also, this is a problem that's occurring on multiple properties. And as Laura discussed earlier, that's a consideration for something to be included in the master plan, as it's not just occurring on one property, but it would take several property owners, getting several property owners involved. And that's very similar to this along West Oak. This is water coming down from Brownell. And normally right about here, there, right in the middle, there is an inlet, which is that square concrete structure that's part of the storm sewer system that the stormwater goes into, but you can't actually even see it here because the water is so deep. And this is another example of a problem going across multiple properties. And the last issue we saw quite a bit of throughout the city was driveway flooding. And this occurred quite often with the roadway flooding and yard flooding, and the roadway flooding and flooding onto the driveway. And as you can see in these photos, the driveways are completely flooded with water, and that is that's a concern because we don't want any property damage. We don't want damage to your vehicles, and we want you to be able to get into your house and into your car and leave your house even when it's raining. And with all of that information that we collected, these two exhibits have been created, and they use the same information but are showing us slightly different things. So this exhibit on the left-hand side shows severity of the problems. So the darker the red, the more severe the problem. And you can see where there are some severe problems throughout Glendale. And then these yellow outlines actually show the projects that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this presentation. And kind of, so it shows you why these projects were developed where they were. And this other exhibit shows pretty similar information. it just shows it in a different way. So it shows the amount of issues. So the black indicates backyard flooding. So this circle here indicates there were 19 properties in this area experiencing backyard flooding. The orange indicates roadway flooding, and this purple indicates driveway flooding. And so these are, again, some of the biggest issues we are seeing throughout the city, and where we were seeing them, and then where shortly when I discuss our projects, where the projects are located. So now we can take another break for questions.
Yes, Alison, we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
And the first question is, how do we know if our water problem is from upstream and not just adjacent property?
Well, that would kind of depend on if you're wondering about your specific property. So we drew in drainage areas. We delineated drainage areas throughout the city. So to determine where the stormwater was going. Without more context, I don't know that I can answer that super thoroughly.
Yeah, I would possibly suggest that if it's a specific issue for a specific property, then that be submitted directly to us. However, yes, it is possible through watershed analysis to determine whether where the flow is coming from and identify the flow path. The next question is the Algonquin area also considered a multiple resident issue?
Yes.
That is correct. And then we have another question. Will this project address the water displacement caused by the larger homes being approved and built in Glendale? And I think I partially addressed that question when I talked about the non-capital improvement projects. And it is a two-pronged approach on how that is taken. So in terms of, because it does affect ordinances and other guidance that can be recommended within the Stormwater Master Plan. However, in addition to that, there are some projects where, because we identify how much water is actually going to a specific point, so we may have a capital improvement project, which if completed would take that into consideration. But again, that is also another question that can be followed up on because it does affect and is related to storm water ordinance development. I believe.
And with that, I'll go ahead and move on to our next section.
We just had another question, but we can answer it after you go through.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so there are some criteria for the capital improvement projects that Laura was discussing in the first section of the presentation. The first one is, and these are not listed in any particular order, number of homeowners a project would benefit. If a project would benefit an entire street or a neighborhood, or is it just going to benefit one or two houses? The benefit cost ratio, which is the benefit of the project versus the cost of the project. Safety, which is very important, and any risk to property, either potential property damage or property damage that has occurred. Severity, how bad is the problem, and roadway accessibility. So there's a photo included here. This is along Parkland. This is an event that happened, I believe, a few years ago. And the roadway was so flooded that that police cruiser actually got stuck and could not continue down the road. And this is this hits a few of these points. This is a safety issue. We need emergency vehicles to be able to access houses at all times, as well as the roadway needs to be accessible, not just for emergency vehicles, but we need you to be able to get to your house. And as Laura stated earlier, we need school buses and deliveries and things like that to be able to go down the road as well. And there's some property damage going on in this photo as well. For the stormwater infrastructure projects, they're divided up into 3 categories, and this is based on how MSD divides up their projects. improvement to storm sewer collection system, storage, and stream bank stabilization. And I'll go into depth on each one of these in the next few slides. Storm sewer collection system. The purpose of these projects is to intercept and convey stormwater. So this photo right here shows an inlet. So when I keep using the term inlet, this is what I'm referring to. It's that square concrete structure that is open on either 1, 2, 3, or 4 sides, or it could be a graded inlet flush with the ground. And that is where the stormwater enters the storm sewer system. And then the storm sewers and channels convey the stormwater. And improvements to those systems are needed in instances of flooding, of surcharge sewer systems, of roadway ponding. And that could be because the sewer system is undersized for the amount of water going there, or there might, so types of work include inlets. So if there's just one inlet in a location or no inlets in a location, and there needs to be 1 or 2 added just to simply bring the water into the system. It could be that the current system is undersized in that location and the sizes of the pipe need to be increased, or that there are no storm sewers in a specific part of Glendale and we need to add some more storm sewers. And then interception and diversion, and that would, an example of that would be if the storm sewer system in one location is too overwhelmed and we need to take some of that flow to a different area and divert it to an area that does have capacity to take that on. The next example of type of project is storage. There are 2 types. There's above ground and below ground. And the purpose of the storage projects are to attenuate flow. So to temporarily store the storm water, take it out of the system, store it, and put it back in the system once the rain event has gone down and there's more capacity in the storm sewers to convey the storm water. And this is applicable for especially high intensity, short duration storms. And there are a few examples here of this photo. On the right-hand side shows a below ground storage being constructed. So once this project would be complete, the roadway would be put back as it was before, and you actually wouldn't even see it. And then the other example is this above ground, and that would be a almost like a pond put in, but it would be typically have concrete walls, and that both examples temporarily store the stormwater. So you don't always have stormwater in there. They are for temporary storage before the water goes back into the system, but it just lessens the burden on the existing storm sewers. And the last type of project is stream bank stabilization. And that would be to stabilize the creek or channel bank that are eroding, especially if they're eroding towards a house structure or a road or something like that. And there are a few different types of stream bank stabilization methods. A few of them listed here: gabing baskets, riprap, rock lining. This photo is one where there was some previous stabilization done that wasn't probably done that was not done properly, and now is ineffective. So we would come up with we would use a method that would be a little bit more permanent in this instance. And in a few slides, I am going to start diving into each of the projects that we've developed. However, before I do that, I do want to share that these are just recommended projects. These are not, there's no timeline on these. They're not for sure going to be completed. We are still in the draft phase of the Stormwater Master Plan. So we are presenting to the public to get some public input. And then we will eventually later this summer, we will finalize the Stormwater Master Plan. Some of these projects are shorter term projects and some are longer term projects. So the shorter term projects can be completed a little quicker and might not be as costly. We might not have to seek funding. And their longer term projects, they would be more costly. We'd have to possibly seek some funding. It would require a lot more design effort, and wouldn't be able to be completed as quickly. And so we are coming up with cost opinions of probable cost, and the MSD pay items were used to come up with these costs. And we did divide up the projects into first tier and second tier projects. The first tier projects met all of the CIP criteria that we discussed earlier in the presentation and all the stormwater master plan criteria. The second tier projects met some of those criteria, but not all of them, but they were still considered and are still considered in the master plan. And projects not considered are projects that do not meet the stormwater master plan criteria. Oops. Here's a list of the first tier projects listed in no particular order. These projects were developed in no particular order and are listed in no particular order here. And the names don't really mean that much to you guys right now, but I'm about to go into and describe each of these projects. And similarly for these are the second tier projects, which I will also discuss. Here's an overall map that I've shown a few different times, and these show you all the projects throughout the city that we are recommending and the locations of them. And here is the first, oh no, okay. Here's the first project that we are discussing. And before we do, I just want to go over a little bit of what we're looking at right now. So at the top here, you can see the project name and a description of the project, the number of homes that will be impacted, easements that will be needed, a cost estimate that was developed, opinion of probable cost, and there is a map over on the left-hand side. All the red shapes show where the projects are located throughout Glendale, and the yellow highlighted box shows you where we are focused on this specific exhibit. And on this exhibit, you can see, I'll kind of tell you a little bit of what we're looking at. Any red lines, those are the sanitary sewer. Those are just kind of there as an FYI. The blue dashed lines are storm sewers. The blue solid lines are channels and creeks. You can see the property lines and the house numbers on the exhibits. And the recommended work is also shown on these exhibits. So for this project, Edwin Avenue underground detention from Sappington Road to South Moreland Avenue. What this was, the second video that I showed earlier was running through the backyards along Edwin Avenue here. So this project has a few different components. It does incorporate underground storage up at the City Hall parking, in the City Hall parking lot, under the City Hall parking lot. That's what the purple shapes are showing. The yellow is showing storm sewers. The outline here shows pavement replacement. So the orange is any pavement, the green is showing any sodding replacement. And that was for those helped us in our cost estimating endeavors. So this project, like I said, and would involve underground storage up at City Hall, some underground storage along South Moreland, extending the storm culvert a little bit where there is currently a pipe that is undersized, adding an inlet along South Moreland Avenue. There is also a roadway improvement project for involving curbing and resurfacing along South Moreland Avenue. This is still in the preliminary phase, but this project would help increase the level of service along South Moreland Avenue as well. Currently, they're seeing some flooding along South Moreland Avenue, right where the storm sewer crosses the street. Those inlets and there are not enough inlets to take on the storm water. They're seeing a lot of storm water standing along the street. They're seeing storm water overtop the banks of the channel in the backyards along Edwin Avenue, as you saw in the video. And so this would help take some water out of the system, help attenuate the flow, and help with the flooding in this area. The next project is Parkland, Elm, and Algonquin stormwater storage. And this project would, and this, the Edwin Avenue underground detention would impact 8 properties and 2 permanent easements would be required. And the cost of this is estimated at 1.8 million. The next project, Parkland, Elm, and Algonquin stormwater storage. This project is a lot of similar things going on in this exhibit to the last one. The purple rectangles show underground detention, but these would be primarily in the roadways along Parkland and Elm and in this paper street along between Algonquin and Devon Road. And that would take some stormwater out of the system. The stormwater network through this area is pretty much all undersized. They're seeing flooding from Cliffside Drive through Algonquin, up Parkland and Elm. And so this would help attenuate the flow, take some water out of the system, and help the flooding going on in this area. This project would benefit 217 properties, 7 easements would be required, and this is about 7.4 million. And again, I do want to remind everyone, I'm not discussing these projects in any particular order. Willow Oak diversion sewer. Currently, between 15 Willow Oak and 6 Kings Pond, there is a sinkhole back here that is taking the storm water from a reach of storm sewer going south from Willow Oak and taking all the storm water into the sinkhole where it's flowing underground to outlet at 6 Devon Road in a channel. And this sinkhole is becoming overwhelmed with that amount of stormwater. So our recommendation is to divert the stormwater, as we discussed earlier, and take the stormwater and directly to the Shady Grove Creek from the sinkhole here. So that would benefit this area as well as downstream, underground downstream of there along 6 Devon. This project would benefit 33 properties and is at 5.1 million. The next one is Devon Road Creek stabilization. As I just mentioned, there's water flowing underground from the sinkhole through the karst, and it's coming out along this creek at this channel at 6 Devon Road. So it's actually eroding further towards the house at 6 Devon Road. And while this project would benefit only one property, it is a pretty big safety concern if that keeps eroding. And so it's proposed to do gabion baskets to stabilize the creek. And it's at $10,000 or $11,000 as the opinion of probable cost. The next project is Idlewild Lane Storm Sewer Relief. The intersection of Dwyer, Hillard, and Idlewild is seeing a lot of flooding in this intersection, and hydraulic analysis determined that the existing storm sewer here was undersized, and so it is recommended to increase the size of this storm sewer and add some additional inlets as well. And again, some of the yellow line, it shows you a storm sewer, and the other shapes show pavement or sodding restoration, and these circles show the proposed inlets and outlets. This project would benefit 57 properties and is estimated at $72,000. The next 3 projects all kind of tie in together. With this project is Juanita Avenue underground storage. And so similarly, it would be storage under the road and would help this Juanita Avenue is seeing some flooding in the street, flowing over onto some of the driveways and into the backyards of these properties. So it would, underground storage at this location would benefit this immediate area, but also the area downstream, which is actually up in this exhibit, the area downstream of here by attenuating some of the flow, taking some of the flow out of the system temporarily, and then releasing it back when there is capacity in the storm sewer system. This project, Juanita Avenue Underground Storage, would benefit 27 properties and has a cost of $930,000. And this next project, Brownell Avenue Underground Storage, is very similar to the last one we just discussed. They're seeing some flooding along Brownell. There's some roadway is flooding over onto some driveways. I think there's been some main structure building flooding as well. And this again would be underground storage to help attenuate the flow in this storm sewer system. This project would benefit 20 properties and has a total cost of about 1.9 million. And this next project, this West Oak and Chelsea Avenue area, is downstream of the last two projects we just discussed. So the Brownell Avenue underground storage and the Juanita Avenue underground storage projects would both help those immediate areas and also this area downstream of the project, of those projects. Earlier, I had showed a photo of backyard flooding back between 715 West Oak and 718. And so the storage upstream would help attenuate some flow, and we are recommending increasing the size of the storm sewer along this reach as it is undersized, and adding an inlet. This project will benefit 53 properties and has a total cost of $146,000. Alexandra Avenue storm sewer from Sappington Road to Glenway Drive. Currently along Alexandra, there are no storm sewers going up the road, going up Alexandra to Sappington. So there's kind of a high point in the elementary school parking lot where that stormwater is flowing over onto Sappington, and along Sappington there are no storm sewers in this area, and some of that stormwater is flowing into the houses along Alexandra at Alexandra and Sappington, and the rest of the stormwater is flowing down Alexandra Avenue up until these inlets down here. And it's too much stormwater for those inlets to take in. So we are recommending extending the storm sewer up the street to help capture the stormwater at different points along Alexandra Avenue. This project would benefit 35 properties and has a total cost of $443,000. The next project is Berrywood West Storage. This would be an example of that above ground storage that I showed earlier, which is not buried, it's open, and this would take some water out of the system temporarily near Glenbrook, and so this would help this area. And also downstream of here is Frederick, which has gotten quite a bit of flooding in the road. So this, again, all these storage projects benefit that immediate area and also the area downstream of the project. So this project would benefit 65 properties and has a total cost of $192,000. This next project, Berrywood East Storage, is very similar. It would be above ground storage, and it would attenuate some flow in the system. It would take some water temporarily out of the system and help this area and help downstream of here, which immediately downstream of here is Frederick, which has the intersection there gets flooded quite frequently. This project will benefit 63 properties and is estimated at $147,000. The next project is Glenmore Avenue Stormwater Improvement. So there's several aspects of this project. There is currently this sewer between Glenbrook and Glenmore is undersized, and it goes from a 30-inch to a 27-inch sewer currently. So we are recommending to increase this reach of sewer also to 30-inch and add some inlets along the sewer to help capture the stormwater. We are recommending some storage, so some stormwater attenuation. There's a lot of stormwater that's flowing from Lisa K to Glenmore Lane, and so we are recommending installing some swales to help direct the stormwater down to be captured in the storm sewers, and then down here it would be recommended for some underground storage. And this project would benefit 21 properties, and 14 easements would be required, and the estimated cost is $444,000. The next project is Madison Avenue Storm Sewer Extension from Monier Place to Northbury Road. Currently, there is a bit of stormwater coming from Monier. There's a flow path between two of these houses and coming down from Manchester, and it's not being efficiently captured by the existing storm sewer in the area. So it's recommended to extend the storm sewer and add an additional inlet. This project would benefit 4 properties, 2 easements would be required, and is estimated to be $20,000. And the last project, we actually came up with, these were 3 separate projects that we grouped together as they were all pretty small projects. The first one is along Brownell Avenue, between 1230 and 1240. The storm sewer currently is of adequate capacity, but the double inlets are needed along this street. So it would be just installing double inlets instead of the single inlet that is currently there. The next one is at Glavensta Place. The backyards along Glavensta, the water is coming straight down from, I think, Berry Road. And so we are recommending the addition of inlets and curbs to help direct water efficiently towards the inlet, along with some storm sewer improvements. And the last one is at Berry Oaks Drive and Northbury Road. There was a roadway improvement project along at this intersection at some point, and the inlets were not actually raised, so they are not super efficiently capturing the stormwater in this area. And then we are recommending some curbing to help direct the stormwater to the inlets along Berry Oaks Drive. So these 3 projects together would benefit 45 properties and have a total cost of $93,000. There are a few MSD projects. One is an active project, East Essex Avenue, 802, 804 storm sewer. And that's this pink line down here. If you live in this area, you're probably already aware of this project, or you will be. I think they might have had their public meeting through MSD and might be an easement acquisition. And there are 3 other projects that MSD has noted but are currently unfunded, and those are shown in green on this exhibit. They are Berry Park Drive storm sewer, Nancy Carroll Lane storm sewer, and Algonquin Wood Place at Berry Road storm sewer. There's also some non-construction projects, and one of those is to complete risk assessment and flood mapping. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about that one in the next slide. The next one is stormwater ordinance, and developing a stormwater ordinance for the city of Glendale. I know we had a question earlier that was about infill development. So adding on an addition to a house, adding on expansion to a driveway, or taking an existing house, demolishing it, and building a bigger house on the same lot. Those are all examples of creating more impervious surface. So water can infiltrate where there's grass or landscaping or gravel, but it cannot infiltrate where there is a house or concrete. So those are examples of impervious surface that water cannot infiltrate. The more impervious surface that is put in an area, the more the stormwater problems are going to continue to get worse. I did hear from a lot of residents out in the field that they've had worse problems since people in their neighborhood have put additions on or built new houses and things like that. And so coming up with a stormwater ordinance to help those problems down the road would definitely be a recommendation, as well as Laura discussed that Glendale is a co-permittee with MSD on MSD's MS4 stormwater permit. And there are 6 minimum control measures that are a part of that should be observed. Public education and outreach and public participation are 2, and those we're doing right now. We're getting some public participation from you guys in the meeting right now, and educating the public. So making sure that people don't have inlets blocked off in their backyards, making sure that inlets are free and clear of debris and any landscaping or any other obstructions that would cause the stormwater to have issues getting into the system. Another minimum control measure is illicit discharge detection and elimination, management of construction site runoff, management of post-construction site runoff in new development and redevelopment. So again, the infill development, I think, has caused some problems for in certain areas of Glendale for certain people. So making sure that if any additional impervious surface is added to a lot, that's not going to cause further stormwater issues in the neighborhood. And then good housekeeping in municipal operations. Again, keeping the inlets free and clear of debris can go a long way in collecting stormwater. And the risk assessment flood mapping that I said I'll talk about in the next slide, that's here. So currently, the city of Glendale's area it's outside the total drainage area that would trigger FEMA flood mapping. So as these light blue areas in surrounding municipalities show the floodplain and where there's risk for flooding. And because Glendale is smaller and does not require that FEMA flood mapping be complete, it is recommended to do a risk assessment and see where there are risks for flooding along these channels and creeks in Glendale. So it is a recommendation that the city complete this as well. And I did talk a little bit earlier about short-term versus long-term projects. And just a few examples of that is short-term projects are maintenance, making sure that the storm sewers are in good condition, the channels are clear, that culverts are clear of debris, that inlets are clear, and that the stormwater can most efficiently enter and then exit the system. And also, so just ongoing maintenance is something that's pretty easy to continuously do, as well as there are some shorter term projects, and those would include projects that are on the smaller side. Projects that are not as costly would not require very much design, if any design, and those can be completed in a shorter time frame. Then the longer term projects are going to be the more expensive, more permanent. They're going to require possible funding. They're going to have some significant design components associated with them, etc. And questions. I imagine there are quite a few. And this is our last question slide.
Yes, and you may have answered, but you can give some additional clarification. One question that came up is the current system that is pipes too small and getting overwhelmed?
Yes, and in some areas of Glendale, the pipes are too small. So how we kind of address that is one of 2 ways. It's either increasing the size of the pipe or the storage. So taking water out of the pipe temporarily until it can have additional capacity.
Another question, Alison, is how does the water exit the underground storage?
So the water would flow in through a pipe and then flow out through a pipe back into the storm sewer.
Yeah, so just to add on to that, where we are only able to put underground storage in specific areas. One of the requirements for us to be able to put underground storage is that there must be a receiving inlet or downstream conveyance system that is within the flow path that the water can be directed to. So while the underground storage will attenuate it for a while, if it has an overflow to the downstream storm sewer pipes, and there's also some underground connections to the downstream inlets, and the size of that controls how much water goes out. We have another question, Alison. Several of your proposed solutions involved temporary, I think they were permanent, underground storage. Well, storing the water temporarily, I believe that's what they mean. When you estimate the size of the storage capacity required, how much rainwater, perhaps measured in inches per hour, are you planning to capture? During your presentation this evening, you've had an inch of rain in less than 30 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to answer that question in a few different parts. One is there are different design storms. So you can design to a 2-year storm, a 10-year storm, 25-year, 50-year storm. And some projects, I would say not all the projects were designed to the same design storm, and that is due to cost in the amount of storage required. So as Laura stated earlier, we are not going to be able to mitigate every single rain event. An inch, I think you said we had an inch of rain in less than 30 minutes. That is a very intense rain. And but it's also a pretty short duration. So that would be a high intensity, short duration storm that we would design storage for, but we won't be able to capture all the water from every single storm in the storage. Laura, did you have anything you wanted to expand on there?
Yeah, that is correct. And like say, because we have so much real estate, we have to figure out how much storm we can actually capture. So our focus in terms of underground storage was to capture the more frequent, short duration, high intensity storms like you mentioned before. So if it's, I believe that would be 2.5 inches is what is the 24-hour long duration storm. So we did not, for example, design for at 50-year or 100. If we could capture and store a 2-year, 24-hour storm, then that is 2-year, and I think the duration is actually 20 minutes, but it can go on also for 24 hours. But the time of concentration also is impacted by that, by how quickly does water travel from one point to the other. So there are a couple of things we consider in terms of designing our attenuation measures, and that includes shorter duration storms, but high intensity. And then we also consider like how far does water get to travel before it can be stored. So it is more where you select to put your underground storage. For example, if you put it completely upstream, you will not be capturing a lot of flow because you're upstream of where the flow is. So we are very selective as to where we are able to put in our underground detention. And like you said, it's not even for every one of them. So we may have more than one project that is designed for a specific drainage area. So we may have 2 sections of upstream drainage and then have another detention pond further downstream, just so that we are able to capture it based on how much real estate we actually have to put in a project. I do see, Alison, there was another follow-up question on where to put specific pond to mitigate flow, I believe, for 6 Devon. And I think that is one we can follow up later, though I think you did discuss the Paper Street detention on one of the projects.
Yes.
Just to reiterate what Alison said, the numbers on these projects, P1, P2, P3 through 14, are provided for reference. So they're used for reference, they are not a ranking mechanism, and they're not in any order. So they are provided so that if you have any feedback, we know how to ID a specific project. There was one more additional question, Alison, and I think you may have answered this one already. The map is hard to read without the streets identified. That may be referencing the maps we previously showed before you dived into individual projects. And there is a question on what is the timeline on the project decisions and how property owners will be adversely impacted with construction. Since this is not a design project yet, this is a planning process. If any of these projects were to come to bear, then that would be addressed at the time. There's information provided on that also, and we can specifically follow up on that question. Alison, there's a project number 9. Is the plan to increase pipe size as well as adding inlets?
The
P9 is the project number.
I don't know how to make this go away. Yeah, the plan, no, the plan is, so our initial analysis determined that there is adequate capacity in the storm sewer. It just doesn't have capacity to take on all the water in this one location. So the pipe size is not being increased, but inlets are being added.
There's a specific question, and I will, well, it's not specific, but I do hope that the resident is able to send us so that we know who to respond to. The question is, so if my house and street are not in any of these plans, then am I responsible for paying all the costs of correcting the excessive stormwater drainage in my backyard that runs across yards of 2 other neighbors? We have held off installing a new patio because of the current one being washed away, and we fear that our house foundation will be affected eventually, thinking we are going to just install a huge French drain to help protect our house and foundation. I would advise that specifically information on the particular property be submitted to us so that we are able to address it. One of the things we noted is that there are multiple properties involved. On the screen, you can see how to contact us. This, because we're having this presentation, does not mean that we have finalized all the possible projects or reviewed all the data that we could possibly get from the residents. We are encouraging residents to continue to provide us with information. So as we look through the data we either collected through base mapping, MSD, soil mapping, watershed analysis, we also have the observed data from the residents that can give us additional information to be able to recommend projects. There are some questions that are directed for operation and maintenance, and those will be directed to the city, and they will be answered accordingly and an answer provided. Again, if you went ahead and submitted a question anonymously, we do ask that you also submit your information if you want a direct answer. Otherwise, we can answer the question generally. There's a question also, has the Edwin Avenue project taken into consideration the condos on Sappington and Moreland runoff? That one you want to take, Alison?
Sure.
Edwin, I believe, is the first project.
Yes. Yeah. So, you can't see them super well, but actually, I think I'm going to go to. Oh gosh, this is going to go quite a ways. When we were developing the drainage areas for these projects to size them, I went too far. So we divided, I think one thing I forgot to say earlier was we divided these 3 major watersheds into sub watersheds. And so, for example, all the water in this this sub watershed drains to this point. Laura, can you see my mouse right here?
Yes.
Am I showing? Okay. So that's how it this level that we're doing the stormwater master plan, which is still a pretty high level. We're not in the weeds on any of these designs yet. But that's how we did the sizing of for each of these projects for the stormwater, is we divided up into sub drainage areas. So if there's a drop of water that lands in one of these drainage areas, where is it going to flow? Is kind of the point of doing this division into sub drainage areas.
Okay, thanks, Alison. There is a question. Please display the slide of second tier projects.
Sorry, I hope I'm not making everyone dizzy right now.
There we go. There you go. There is a question which, when do you think some of these projects may start? So like we mentioned before, prioritization of the projects happens later on in the final report. However, actual start and end dates are not provided because that is dependent on funding. So the Stormwater Master Plan will go ahead and provide a benefit cost analysis. And when that is done, the projects themselves in terms of a timeline, those will depend on what funding becomes available to the city. So we help with, for example, what can be done through OMC. If we go to OMCI funding, that's on a particular schedule. So if OMCI funding is approved for a certain project, then that project can be completed. On the other hand, if we apply and get approved for ARPA funding, that also says we can do more projects, and so that impacts when projects can be completed. Like you say, it's an application, so we cannot make any promises and say specifically this project will be completed on this date. What we can say is that we are prepared to submit projects for funding. There's a question, Alison. Will the slide deck be sent out to residents for further review?
Yes, the recording of this presentation as well as the presentation itself is going to be made available to the city of Glendale, and I think the plan is posted on the website or links to them.
Thank you. Another question, and correct me if I say the name wrong, does the Juanita plan include pipe size increase?
It does not include pipe size increase, and that's because if we increased the
You just passed.
yes, if we did increase the pipe size, we would actually have to increase the pipe size for the whole entire network or reach of storm sewers right through here. So instead of doing that, the proposed solution is to just instead take some of the storm water out of the system.
I wanted to use this slide, Alison, to explain one of the questions. The one is, how does the underground storage discharge. And I think this shows, for example, how those underground systems have to be connected to receiving storm sewers with the yellow lines right there. We have additional questions. Could we please see map and cost of P003 once again? There is two, I think they asked for three, P003.
Oh, thank you.
And this is a project that is an interceptor to
So
divert
this is,
flow.
I'd say this is an example of a, say, more long-term project. So a short-term project would be the stabilization of the creek at 6 Devon, where this stormwater is currently actually flowing to. And then the longer-term solution is to divert and intercept this flow.
I mean, those are all there is a question on would you be addressing the overflow of the storm channel that is on Glen Way that overflows through our properties? So to be specific, I'd also ask that the property owner let us know, and we can determine what property that is and make sure that we note if we have addressed it.
I am going to go back to the slide with our contact information. Again, you've probably received this previously in some of the letters that were sent out notifying you that we were going to be out in the field and notifying you of the public meeting. And if not, here's the contact information for myself, for Laura, and for the superintendent of the city of Glendale, Terry Jones. And please reach out to any of us via phone or email. And if there's a specific question or you want us to go over over something to do with your specific property, we are definitely happy to do that.
Again, I wanted to say thank you. It's 7:28, and to be respectful of everybody's time, we are going to go ahead and end this session, which is the first of two. Remember, we are going to have another presentation on June 1st, which is a Wednesday at the same time. So please check the website also for any additional information, the website at the City of Glendale website, and register. If you're already registered for this one, I believe you are still able to still join the one
Yes,
next
they're
week.
the same link.
Yeah. So hope to see you. Do bring your neighbors. Again, continue to post questions to us. If you pose a question, we might be able to answer it and have it on the list prior to the meeting. And if you have any additional information you'd like to submit, please go ahead and submit it, and please do contact us. If you have any ideas, we do take those too, because we understand homeowners do have concerns and ideas as well. Thank you.